everybody. Today we're talking about exercise and an article that I read today. It's a series of articles that are coming out right now about high intensity training. Now this particular article is about older people, and it's about aerobic training, which is endurance training in high intensity, which is a little bit of a misnomer as a title. But it's basically a study by the Mayo Clinic, reputable clinic with research, and these scientists that found benefits in doing high intensity training. Whenever I look at these articles, it occurs to me that they're missing an essential piece, which is the warm-up. And these articles are very frequent, and I see some friends commenting on social media that, hey, this is great. They call it HIIT training. We'll talk about it. But everybody says, hey, this is fantastic. We should do it. But nobody talks about warm-up. And without warm-up, I think it's actually a very risky activity. It could be potentially dangerous. It's a recipe for injury. So let's talk about a few things. First one is, what is high intensity training? HIIT training. So HIIT, you might have seen this in a few places. It stands for high intensity interval training. So the idea of these intervals is that they're short in nature, and that during a period of time, we're going to do a few of these short intervals where we're going to do the best we can, sprinting, meaning very, very close to maximum pace for a short amount of time, some recovery, and then going again at maximum pace, then some recovery, and again a few more times. For strength, it's the same thing. You could do weightlifting, you could do push-ups, you could do pull-ups, you could do all kinds of heavy lifting exercises, which essentially do the same thing. In general, despite the article saying aerobic, all of these exercises are anaerobic. They are non-aerobic. An aerobic exercise is when basically your body uses up to the level of oxygen that the blood can supply to the muscles. So we have a heart, we have lungs, and we have a capacity, a volume of oxygen that the lungs and the heart and the arteries can bring to the muscles. If we are within that capacity, we are in aerobic mode, which means that we can do endurance. We can do this for a long time because we always supply more oxygen than needed. When you go anaerobic, it means that you're using more energy than you have oxygen to burn. And so that can only last for so long because basically you're going on reserves, and then at some point you run in such deficit of oxygen that you have to slow down or you even have to stop. And that's why these intervals are interesting, because they push our muscles and they push the body and they stress, mostly beneficially, the body up to a point where we can sustain that for a while, and then we slow down and we recover, and then we do it again, and then we slow down and we do it again. So what did they find? That's the link to the study, of course, in blue. They found a number of things. One is, first of all, when you do these things like high interval trainings, you can breathe better, you have more muscle, and you have more insulin sensitivity. That's all good for fitness. The cellular function is improved. The muscle strength is improved. The fourth bullet is interesting, which is the gene expression. Now, you might have heard about the term epigenetics. Epigenetics is how the genes express themselves. When you think about it, we are born as babies with a gene pool, DNA. And that DNA, when we're a baby, it's intact. it's expressing itself in the best way possible. As we age, that gene and that DNA is still there for the most part, but the challenge becomes the expression of those genes. And so it's almost like you still have the paper with the code written on it, but it cannot be read anymore. So by doing high intensity training, we essentially improve the readability of the genes, and that's epigenetics. So really fantastic benefit there. Then more, functioning and more protein expression. So we can see that there's a number of benefits from high intensity training, that it's worth looking into it, and it's worth practicing. If you're doing some sports like cycling, it's part of the routine, because when you bike, you're going to go up, you're going to go down, and at the beginning of hills, you're going to have more energy than, you're going to have some reserves because you've been on flat, you've been downhill, you've been able to recuperate. And then, you go up and you basically increase that intensity, and then you go back down. Same goes for, running up and down. Anything that is non-linear is, in essence, as an exercise, as a physical exercise, a high intensity training, because you will push it and then you'll rest for a while, or you'll go at the lower speed, lower pace. So why does warm-up matter? There's three ways, I think, to really look at the downside of not warming up. The first one is that if you're not warmed up, your joints, your muscles, your body, even your heart is not in a condition to perform at peak, and it's more fragile. We can think about the fact that when we wake up in the morning, very early in the morning, we go back from a sleep state. And when we are in that sleep state, the heart rate is low, the blood pressure is low. It's pretty much the opposite of exercise. If from that point you are asked to sprint, it would be a high likelihood of injury, because you would go like a car from, not started to then pushing down the accelerator to the maximum. So that's a risk factor. The second is that as a result of your body being not warmed up, your performance, when you try to sprint, your performance will be lower. Therefore, your benefits will be lower. And the third is pretty much a plain discomfort. And I think the body really gives the signal, hey, I'm not ready. You can't do this to me. And it's very uncomfortable when you try to just get out the door and sprint. We're just not made for this. So the idea is that before the intervals, we have to start with a certain time period. So I'm going to show you an example of a run that I did a few months ago. I went back to my training calendar and the logs that I had when I saw this article, and I thought, I'm going to find a run that looks like sort of this interval run, and that I can actually take the graphics and then we can play with it. So essentially, warming up is a very, very simple thing. It only takes 10 minutes. Some people say, take 15, 20 minutes, take what is comfortable to you, take what works for you. Personally, I don't even need 10 minutes. I need 8 or 9, just rounding it up to 10. And you want to start with gentle stretches. You want to start with not just doing rubber band, because if you pull a joint or if you pull a muscle and you release it too fast, it's going to basically contract it if you do that within like a 2-second time frame. So you want to stretch gently, not hurt yourself, and then you want to release those muscles within, for example, 5 seconds or 10 seconds, very slowly. No need to do a lot of it. And the rest is really to just start slow, to run really, really slow, or to ride really, really slow. Whatever you're doing, you're going to be doing at pace, have zero concern for performance. This is the warm-up phase, so it really doesn't matter that you run an 8-minute mile or a 9-minute mile or a 10-minute mile or an 11-minute mile. It doesn't matter. What matters is that your heart rate gradually goes up, that you feel comfortable, you feel that you're building strength, that you're building, your temperature is rising, your heart rate is slowly rising, and then you're going to be ready. Before we go into the charts, I'll just say that as much as you want to warm up, cooling down is important. It's the same idea, may not need as much time, but it's basically just flushing all the toxins that you accumulated during the warm-up, and we'll do a separate discussion on that. So let's go quickly into article and then the training log. So this was basically 12 repeats of 45 seconds, all out pushes, all out runs, sprints. So the device that I used measures a number of things, and it did not measure the pace perfectly because these were kind of short sprints. But I think what it measured very well is the run cadence. I'm just going to highlight it here, the run cadence. So you want to look at this chart and you'll see the fact that here we're starting very slowly, and we're starting very slowly for about 9 minutes. You see 9:36, almost 10 minutes. You can see the ground contact at the very beginning on the last chart. The ground contact is high, which means that I was basically halfway running, halfway walking. I was going up a hill, and all I was doing was running really, really slowly. And then you can see ground contact got a little bit better. The cadence, which was also yellow all the way, cadence got green after 6 minutes. And then it's only at minute 10 that we started really pushing. When you look at the pace up there, you can see that it goes in 6 minutes mile. It goes into recoveries of 10 minutes per mile, so really, really slow. Then on the third interval, or the fourth here, it's at 5:30, so 5:30 you're pretty much sprinting. And then we go slowly again, 8:30 or 9, and then again fast, and then slow again. So you get the idea. All right, you're basically doing accelerations and decelerations, accelerations, decelerations. And that's really what HIIT training is all about. You just basically do sprints and you don't stop completely. You just relax and run slower, and you recuperate, you regain your breath, you regain the oxygen deficit. You regain the oxygen deficit during that period until you regain your breath enough and oxygen enough to then overconsume it. And that's the idea of interval training. So back to the warm-up and the cool down. These are really essential. All right, have a good training. Cheers.